So in the Philippines, you have so many cultures, and forget about the number of people group and the number of languages, but cultures itself, you're probably looking at about 170 plus cultures in the Philippines. Those are ethnocultural groupings of people, and each one theologize. And when they think of God, they're theologizing actually, and it's embodied in everyday life. So it's not about just thinking theologically, religiously, but in everyday life, that theological articulation comes out, is acted out every day. So that's why you will hear, see that when you registered, you see that Filipino term, mga kwento, or Tagalog term, mga kwentuhang buhay. Instead of saying mga kwentuhang teolohiya or theological stories, we're talking about stories of life, because it is in those theological articulations are embodied in everyday lives. It is not separate, seen as separate religious category or exercise, and faith grows out of our life stories, turning points, crises, and celebrations, and God is active to shape and focus our everyday decision making. We have three Filipino ministers in the we invited to reflect on their own faith journeys and describe how they have come to talk about God differently with each other and with the congregations they lead. They'll talk about how being immigrants and part of the diasporic Filipino communities has changed the understanding of God, and how theologies emerging in the Philippines can enrich their life and work within the Canadian Church, which is the United Church of Canada, and culture. Um, Let me just, you will see in your chat the order that will follow for the rest of the evening. But in moving to the next one, where the panelists will introduce themselves and the brief description of their topics, we would would like to frame this, that what you'll hear is not necessarily your regular theological articulations or expressions. These are stories out of their lives, and keep reminding yourself that this is actually their theological expressions that they're sharing with you. So let's start with Reverend Kim Vidal to introduce herself, and then a description of her what she plans to share tonight.
Thank you, Emo, and good evening, everyone. My name is Kim Vidal, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I currently serve the congregation of Bells Corners United Church in the city of Ottawa, and this is now my 11th year in that particular congregation. I was born and raised in the Philippines in a city that's called Dagupan, Dagupan, surrounded by the Pacific Ocean and South China Sea. So I was also baptized, confirmed, and participated faithfully in the United Methodist Church in the Philippines. Thanks to my grandfather and grandmother, the late Reverend Alejandro and Florentina Vidal, who served the United Methodist in the Philippines from 1911 until their demise in the late 1960s. They encouraged and supported their 8 children to participate actively in the church following the teachings of Jesus Christ. My late father, Ephraim, and my mother, Candida, followed my grandparents' footsteps in bringing me and my 10 siblings to church. Sorry, we're 11 children in the family. Should I be sorry? Maybe not. There, I was introduced to the Bible through the Sunday school, and to the triune God, and helped me shape my Christian faith by actively involving in many programs of the church, singing in the choir, joining the Sunday school. And then when I was in probably in my teens, I led the youth and then young adults group, and attended several leadership trainings and programs sponsored by the church. My immigration to Canada in 1994 found a new era in my faith journey and that faith journey led me to becoming an ordained female clergy in the United Church of Canada. And during my time, I have attuned myself, and I think I'm still learning to the ethos and the diverse experiences and cultural understandings of the congregations that I have served and am currently serving, which were all very different from my humble beginnings. Aside from sharing some stories about my faith journey, I will also talk about one particular theology, what I would call a theology of resilience and hope. This particular theology has helped me articulate my faith to walk the talk using the Mary Martha paradigm. So, friends, thank you for this wonderful opportunity to share my faith story. And I invite you later on, perhaps, to share your comments as well and ask questions if you have some. Thank you.
I can go next. Let me introduce myself. My name is Ariel. I'm so happy to be here. I'm a minister of I'm currently serving um uh I forgot Asbury and West United Church. That's in Midtown Toronto. I'm completing my doctoral dissertation as of the moment in University of Toronto. Very seldom that, at least in the Filipino imagination, to find a smooth transition between faith and social activism. Often these two, faith and social activism, are in a separate compartments, and that by all means should not interact with one another. Maybe it's the notion of separation of state and church, or the notion that God ordained governments. And that notion in many Filipinos' imagination is sweeping. It made us uncritical even if the regime in the government is authoritarian or simply wrong. So my story will be about a sort of conversion. Others call it a heightening of one's faith or spirituality. The conversion event merged my faith and social activism. What is that conversion event? I will tell later. But it is important to highlight the complementarity of faith in relation to being active in the affairs of a collective marginalized group, that they are not in conflict, as most conservative thoughts would want us to believe. Faith informs my social activism in a way that my source of hope and courage and humility stems from my relationship with Jesus Christ. In the same manner that my social activism informs my faith, like how I will behave as a minister, how I will navigate my relationships with different kinds of people in the church, how I will deal with existing power dynamics inside the church structure, how to allocate theological resources to certain groups. I say theological resources just to mean both the physical resources we have in our church, like building spaces, and soft resources like solidarity, advocacy for marginalized groups, doing rights education, among others. I will tell more later, and I'm happy to be here. Let me just express that.
Thank you, Reverend Ariel. Apologies earlier. I had my mic turned off to Reverend Kim as well. Thank you. Let's turn to Reverend Noel Suministrado. Go ahead, Reverend.
Happy to be here, folks. I am Naval Suministrado, an ordained minister of the United Church of Christ in the Philippines. I took my theological studies in Union Theological Seminary in the Philippines and the Master of Ecumenical Studies in Bosay Ecumenical Institute and the University of Geneva. Coming back, I taught in the very same seminary where I graduated. Before I came to Canada, I taught ecumenical theology and social ethics and was the first minister to be assigned in the mutual recognition of ministry personal agreement between the United Church of Christ in the Philippines and the United Church of Canada. I served Broadway Disciples United Church for 4 years in Winnipeg, and presently I am the minister of Hamyota United Church in the Canadian prairies. My involvements are the United Church of Canada Roman Catholic Dialogue, the International Dialogue of the Disciples of Christ and Roman Catholic Church, the Commission of Faith and Witness. I used to be part of that, of the Canadian Council of Churches, and currently member of the Theology of Interchurch Interfaith Committee of the United Church of Canada. I got admitted to the United Church of Canada in June of 2023. Now, my topic would be, who are we? Where are we? What have we become? And where do we belong? These questions are some of the burning issues that most migrant Filipinos have come to grips within Canada and outside of the church. These questions are filled with stories to tell and as such become the sources of God talks, our theologies. So my presentation is an attempt to tell stories of migrant Filipinos in the hope of getting a theological perspective and understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Noel. Just to I'd forgotten to introduce myself. It's Emo Yango, and I'm a staff at the General Counsel Office. I Part of my responsibility and my work is to provide staff support to the different ethnocultural networks that we have in the United Church of Canada, and one of those would be the Filipino network in the United Church. We would like to turn now to the meat and of tonight. So each one, there'll be a question that I'm actually posting in the chat if you want to read them, but each one will be answered by each of our panel. They'll have several minutes to share as well. Then we'll open it up for questions and answers. Questions from you. You can please type your questions in the chat, or anything you might want to share, put it in the chat, and then it'll be read and then it'll be addressed accordingly. So let's move on to the next part then of our webinar. So beginning with Reverend Kim, what is the turning point in your encounter with God that led to your ministerial calling?
Kim, you're muted.
Sorry, did what was I?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
now?
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Right. So I vividly remember in 1990 that there was this devastating earthquake in the city where I lived in the Philippines. My first career at that time, I was a grade school teacher. So I was teaching at that time when suddenly I heard this loud rumbling sound coming from the depths of the earth, and then the earth quaked, and I literally saw the earth open, spitting hot mud from underneath, and the rest was bizarre. There were cracked pavements and roads, buildings and homes, and you can, if you were seeing this in a movie, the earthquake, when you're in that same place where I was at that point, it was really scary. And the sound of the sea was raging because we were only about maybe 200 meters away from the shore. And I looked up the sky, and the sky was crimson and orange and red. And in our Filipino culture, when the sky turns that in those colors, it means a disaster or a big hurricane or something phenomenal is coming. And I thought that it was literally the end of the world. It was at that point that when I felt like I was standing on holy ground, and I felt so scared, and yet I'm still holding my faith in God, who will give us or give me the sense of security and safety. I felt so uncertain at the time, and yet hopeful that something good will come out from this particular experience. I was so confused, yet I felt like I'm still optimistic that something again good will come out from this disaster. But there was some kind of restlessness that I didn't feel before. And so a few days after this terrible disaster, I went to see the district superintendent of the United Methodist Church. And if you know the structure of the United Methodist Church, we have the district superintendent, just like a regional council minister. So I requested a weekend appointment as a lay minister, and he was so happy to receive me because there were so many areas in our province at that time with no minister at all. So I was assigned to a small rural church, but I did really enjoy my time serving there as a pulpit supply for about 2 years. And in 1992, I decided to seek the approval of the Board of Ordained Ministry for me to enter Union Theological Seminary with the goal of being ordained in the United Methodist Church. So at that time, the clergy in the Methodist Church was predominantly male, and only few women were ordained. So during the interview, I was asked over and over again if I was not making a mistake in my decision in becoming a pastor or a minister. And one of the interviewers said, why not apply to Harris Memorial College? And this is a college where we train deaconesses, all women in that particular institution. And I said, no, I felt that all my gifts are, I really would like to be a minister of the church. And so I did not heed the board's suggestion, and I entered Union Theological Seminary to pursue my dream of becoming ordained. And while in the seminary, I was influenced by three women. My systematic theology professor, the Reverend Dr. Elizabeth Tapia, my Old Testament professor, the late Reverend Dr. Elizabeth Dominguez, and a visiting professor from Hawaii. Her name is Reverend Dr. Renate Rose, who taught an elective on the book of Revelation. So these three women professors would mentor me to understand the Bible as an ancient book with diverse genres, that I must interpret the Bible not in its literal sense, but in its contextual matrices. Why, the what, the who, and to embrace some kind of a theology of resilience. What I mean by this is the resilience is the ability to recover, to bounce back with a better perspective. Because growing up in the Methodist Church, I was very literal in my view of the Bible. I actually I only have one mentor in that milieu, and that's our pastor or minister. And it is developed, this theology of resilience is developed by caring for others and identifying with a particular faith community and taking initiatives while maintaining integrity and dignity and authenticity. And these professors also reminded me over and over again to assert my voice. If I know that I am right, don't be scared to stand up and stand your ground and say what you want in a good manner, and don't be intimidated by others, particularly male pastors and students. My seminary preparation was short-lived due to a family decision to immigrate to Ottawa in 1994. And my dream of becoming an ordained minister was actually fulfilled here in Canada after so many years of push and pull and twists and turns, transitions, heartaches, headaches, challenges, and sacrifices. So to be continued. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Kim. Let's follow that up with Reverend Ariel. What your story the turning point in your encounter with God that led to your ministerial calling?
Yeah, sure. So it was a turning point for me when I joined an immersion program led by the Ecumenical Youth in the Philippines. I was active with the National Council of Churches in the Philippines, and those immersion program were led by NCCP. Uh, those immersion programs are to marginalized communities like urban poor, indigenous peoples, peasant communities, among others. It was very vibrant looking back. Lots of young people. Our group went to an urban poor community, and then we went to visit a political prisoner. So we went to the jail and sat down with the political prisoner. And to my surprise, this political prisoner is a pastor. At that time, I wanted to be a pastor, but of course, I don't want to be jailed. Why was he in jail was the prevailing question in my mind. Is he like other criminals? What did he do? In our interview with him, we learned that he was abducted one Sunday morning after the church service in front of his church, south of Manila, in front of the congregation and in front of his family by a group of armed men. He has a wife and two daughters. They witnessed the abduction. The congregation also witnessed the abduction, and he was brought inside a tinted Toyota van without a plate number. And for several days, he can't be found. Imagine the shock of the congregation and the terror of his family witnessing the abduction. And while hearing this from him, I was also terrified. So after a week, he was surfaced in a jail in Cavite, and the reason he was abducted was because he is leading a resistance movement for against the construction of a big mall that will have to displace a big community of urban poor dwellers. So this urban poor community are threatened to be displaced. The government does not have a concrete plan for their relocation. This pastor's name is Berlin Guerrero. Pastor Berlin mobilized people to protest the construction of a big mall. He was abducted and was tortured, and that the story of his torture distraught me. I was uneasy after the visit to the jail. I searched on YouTube to see if he's there, and there was a reenactment of the torture experience. I searched about him online and the struggle of the urban poor communities, and they are all there. One thing is for sure, I was not the same person when I got out of the prison. I told myself I wanted to be like Berlin Guerrero. I wanted to fight for what he fought for. That was how my faith was, politicized. Since then, I became active in advocacy groups, joined protest movements. I became part of Migrante. Migrante is a political advocacy group mainly for Filipinos advocating the rights of immigrants in Canada or wherever there are Filipinos abroad. They do political education work, campaign for undocumented migrants. I volunteered for Migrante here, and as a minister, my advocacy work for them includes writing statements to be read in their rallies. I attend their rallies wearing my clerical polo. I think it's a strong visual that immigrants, especially those what we call undocumented or those that does not hold legal papers, they call it illegal immigrants, but in migrants' rights discourse, we say no one or no human is ever illegal. I also offer a space in the church so that they safely hold meetings there when they want to be visited on their life's milestones like birthdays or when they are sick. I come. Those those are the faith or theological resources we can deploy to support immigrant communities. And I think the correct approach in becoming in solidarity with them is to seek opportunity to be immersed in their lives. By immersing ourselves with them, we will come to appreciate the rationality, the reason that they are such. Because oftentimes we view their situation from the lens of the law or from the popular notion like migrants get the local people's job and that Filipinos are just a bunch of karaoke singing happy people. Having to immerse in their lives will give the opportunity to parse through the stereotype and will enable us to understand them better and allocate or mobilize church theological resources for them.
Thank you, Reverend Ariel. Let's turn to Reverend Noel.
My turning point, sorry, my turning point is my involvement with the Christian Youth Fellowship when I was way younger, decades ago, and it grew by leaps and bounds. And that involvement with youth work led me to involvement with social justice issues. It was the years of the Marcos dictatorship in the Philippines, and so being in the seminary during that time, I got so involved with the social justice issues, human rights involvements, and all of that. Onwards, I became part of an ecumenical group which opposed um, a road widening project that would cut through our beloved mountain in the province where we lived. And it was quite successful. We were able to stop that move coming from the government because we felt that cutting the mountain in half would bring disastrous um, consequences. Eventually, my ecumenical involvement with the Roman Catholic Church widened and deepened, as well as other ecumenical involvements and also immersion programs. Glenn, I see here is there. Glenn is part of one immersion program that we had. So glad to see you here, Glenn. So these ecumenical involvements led me to a lot of other things, particularly with the Roman Catholic clergy in the Philippines. So that is my turning point of faith. Thank you.
So we invite for the next few minutes or so, if there are any comments from the folks from the other viewers or participants, and then or type it in, or you can just raise your hand and or speak into your mic. We just want to make this is the part where we want hopefully there'll be some interaction between you and the panelists. Okay, well, silence is golden. We'll move on to the next question. And the next question would be, what stories do you want to share about ministerial engagements in the United Church? And again, these are still part of the mga kwentuhang buhay, where God talks from the panelists. Let's start this time with Reverend Noel. We'll go around the other way.
It's thank you, Eamon. Share about ministerial engagement. And one of the things that I discovered going and being assigned in the United Church of Canada church was it shattered my assumptions. There's a lot of assumptions coming to Canada as an as a minister. But I found out one of the things that I found out is that, and I serve Broadway Disciples United Church, which is predominantly Filipino. I thought I was in the Philippines because I was dealing with 85% of the Filipinos, as my congregation. And so these are some of the surprises, some of the aha moments. But also it inspired me because I thought there's a lot of possibilities going on here. And so it's one of those among the many, many stories of pastoral engagement that I had. More to come. Thank you.
Sorry, Emo.
Yeah, there's
There's a
go ahead.
question.
There's a
Yeah.
question there, or it's up to you. Might go ahead.
There's a question.
Address the question.
Yes. Was it easier? Was it any easier to become ordained in Canada, or did you encounter the same resistance? Thank you very much, Ruth, for this question. Actually, I really enjoyed my time in Canada as I underwent all these hurdles to becoming an ordained minister. But I almost did not pass my first interview. I would say maybe my first and one and only interview, because when I was interviewed with about a panel of 5 or 6 people, one of them asked me this question: what if you were assigned to a rural church that's about to close? How would you journey with the people, and how would you transition the congregation so it will, eventually close down? And my answer was, I said, I don't want the church to close. I would do my best um, to make it to revitalize it and to make it alive. I'm going to pray hard that, this all this situation in the congregation will just pave some wonderful opportunities for the congregation to flourish once more, and the uh the the reaction I got was that I was not realistic. Perhaps because, again, being shaped by this theology of resilience, resistance, resilience, I thought that for me it's really difficult to see and to say, okay, let's close this church without even trying, without even, so I I thought at that point in time, during my interview, that I will not pass. But I think I have some guardian angels, and I was able to go through. And I think that was the only hurdle I received from the journey towards ordination here. And I was fully supported. I was embraced like one of, Canadians, even if I was not, you know. So that particular experience, I will never forget.
Thank you, Kim, Reverend Kim. Jordan, from moderator, we'll go back to Noel after this round here of questions. Okay. Go ahead, Ariel, Reverend Ariel, your turn. How do you to address that question of what stories you want to share about being a
Yeah,
minister engagements in the United Church?
yeah. So I minister in Asbury and West United Church, Midtown Toronto, in Lawrence and Bathurst area. Some people there are rich, some are Filipinos. It's like the rich neighborhood and the Filipinos. They are coexisting. I've learned from my members that during the live-in caregiver program of the government, the Filipinos that comes to Canada intend to work as caregivers. So they go to rich neighborhood, and Filipinos are coming in as caregivers. And when their contract expired, they chose to stay around the neighborhood area. That explains that in a rich neighborhood, Filipinos are residing there. My experience in UCC Canada is that most Filipinos who are part of the church are lay leaders in their congregations back home. They have been formed in their local church, meaning church is not a stranger to them. Before coming to Canada, their lives evolves around the church. They are members of their local denomination, doing church leadership stuff, providing leadership in Sunday school, in finances. They go to UCC because UCC is the nearest equivalent of their denomination back home. They normally comes from the United Church of Christ in the Philippines and United Methodist tradition, or my church, the Iglesia Evangelica Methodist, or the Philippine Evangelical Methodist Church. And they value the denomination's name. I have one member who decided that they go to Asbury and West because they saw the Methodist sign in the building. Methodists are differently built. We have loyalty to our denomination. So most of my Filipino members need not any introduction to the church. Immediately if they arrive, if Filipinos arrive in your congregation, you can ask them to preside or sing in the choir or sing solo. They will most likely than not be engaged in the life of the church. You can even ask them to preach. For sure, they will say no at the initial, but you have to build a relationship. And second time you ask that question, they will probably say yes. They are normally shy at the beginning. So I'm saying this just to gesture to the fact that when Filipinos step into a United Church congregation, it's most likely than not, they are the kind of people you want to talk with if you want to assign leadership roles. And that's what I'm experiencing in Asbury and United Church, Asbury and West United Church. And believe me, they have a set of friends they already would want to invite before you ask them to bring their friends. They already thought about bringing their friends to the church. If you are assigning them to leadership position, just make sure that meetings are happening on a weekend, or maybe just do it after the service. These people are working committedly during the weekdays. So yeah, it's been enriching to serve in a multicultural congregation, and the church has two sides. The 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 left side of the church, most people there most people who sit there are Filipinos, and the other side are called others. So it's Filipinos and the other. Yeah.
Thank you, Reverend Ariel. Let's go back to Reverend Kim to tell her story briefly on this experience as she ministers in a United Church congregation. And then we'll go to the chat and read some of that. And there's a couple of questions that already been responded to or answered by. But anyway, we'll go back to that. Go ahead, Reverend Kim.
Thank you, Emma. So as soon as I arrived in Ottawa in 1994, the first thing I did was to find a theological school where I could continue what I'd started in the Philippines. So I enrolled at St. Paul University, completed my Bachelor of Theology there. But right after my graduation, I was looking for a job that's actually connected with my degree, and then I learned that I couldn't go through a discernment process unless I have a congregation. So I actually attended Wesley United Church, which is just a few blocks away from the university, and I transferred my church membership there in 1995. Befriended the minister, Reverend Karen Niven, the diaconal minister, and through her guidance, I was able to learn the history of the United Church. And again, I became very involved at Wesley United Church, so much so that I was elected as a lay representative of the church to the Ottawa Presbytery. So from there, I learned so many things. It became like another university for me, joining the Ottawa Presbytery. And honestly, joining the United Church of Canada was like a breath of fresh air for me, because I found a denomination that was part of my dream of what a church should be, a welcoming church that upholds women as equal to men, a church that advocates for human rights, the rights for the 2S LGBTQ 1A1 plus or two, I can't remember all the affirming process in a church, a church that embraces equal leadership opportunities among lay and clergy, and a justice-seeking church, and one that encourages lifelong learning and freedom of expression. So United Church has given me that opportunity to use fully my gifts and my time and contributions, no matter how big or small. After graduation, 2 years after that, I got married to a second generation Korean Canadian. He was born here. And we have two sons. And I started working here and there, but not in a church setting. And during those times that I was working in a secular community or workplace, I felt again that restlessness in my spirit. And so in 2003, I had the courage to return to my first love, which is my ministerial calling. And I went to the board at Wesley Church and said I would like to apply for some kind of a discernment. And I'm not going to go for ordination yet because I have two young children. So I went for a discernment that of a staff associate. I think there was that, some kind of position at that time. So after a while, there was an opening for me after I passed all the requirements and was received as a staff associate. I focused more on working with youth and children. So in 2004, um, I was hired as a part-time joint youth minister at Stittsville United Church here in Ottawa. At the same time, St. Thomas Anglican Church. Again, that has enriched really my engagements with people because of two traditions. And so what happened then was I was so engaged with this that I left my work at that time in as an IT administrator in one of the high tech companies in Ottawa. Every time I stepped into the church and engaged the children and youth, my heart was brimming with joy, you know, and I said, this is really what I would like to do. And at the time, I met another fantastic female minister, the Reverend Camille Lipset, who encouraged me to pursue ordination. And she said, you know what, I don't, she told me that she'd like me to pursue this. And so one day she introduced me to the principal at Queen's Theological College, and the rest was history. I was ordained in 2009, and my settlement at that time was in a 2-point charge congregation in a rural community in Osgood Cars, and that's about 40 minutes away from my home. And but I served those two congregations for 4 years, and now I'm at Bells Corners United Church, a wonderful congregation to be. Right now we are working to becoming an affirming congregation. So I know that Susan Young, the chair of our affirming circle, is here with us. And this is a congregation that really looks after, many outreach activities. And the way I have been shaped by this theology of resilience, I have been imparting this with my congregation. And to just give you some highlights of my ministry, I was able to publish a book. Actually, if you are not familiar with this, but I was able to put a book together, published by Pilgrim Press. It's Moon Under Her Feet, the Women of the Apocalypse, which is a Bible study guide for women as they read or learn the book of Revelation. So I also so happy with the Train the Trainers program for racial justice, and becoming a steward of the General Council and many others. So
Thanks, Kim.
yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
it's been
We'll
long, it's a long
continue more.
story.
Yeah, appreciate it. I just want to go to the chat, folks. Some of you have actually written down, and from Jordan Cantwell, Noel, have you been able to continue to engage in ecumenical dialogue with Filipino Catholics here in Canada? I think Reverend Noel replied to that, but do you want to add more to that? Okay. And just leave the other parts there. From Sheila Lavender, I appreciate already how your personal stories and experiences enrich our beloved United Church of Canada. And then and yeah, that's, oh yeah, well, Ruth Ollie, Kim will send the name of the book in the chat for you. Let's move on to the other question here. The next part. Yeah, the next question for our panelists.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, the last one would be: what are some of your emerging theological challenges that have helped you in your ongoing theological articulations? We are limited in time, so
Yeah.
just anyway,
Okay.
help use as much as
Very,
you want.
very quick. I think one of the emerging theological challenge is what I call the changing face of the United Church of Canada. Um, Having been a newcomer, I would say I've been barely 6 years in the United Church of Canada. But, the United Church of Canada is a changing church. I look at it from that perspective. But we have the United Church of Canada as a white church with all its tradition. But at the same time, it's changing. And I remember Michael Bear in 2019, we had a breakfast together, and he made mention that, we're about to face extinction if the current trend continues. But the level of migration and demographics is changing. So I think that poses a possibility and a challenge, as so to speak, particularly with the theological and challenges that come with it. The discovery of the journey, and at the same time reimagining the church as we go along. Thank you.
I'm pretty sure Reverend Noel can add more to that, but we'll just send your questions if you want that to be expanded a little bit more. Let's go to Reverend Kim briefly. Then, what are some of these emerging theological challenges that you see happening moving forward?
Right. I think it's more on interpretation of the texts that are posing some challenges. For example, when I talk about the theology of resilience and hope embodied in the Mary Martha paradigm of ministry, we always think that Mary is always elevated as the one that's better than Martha. But I think this is a blatant misunderstanding. So for me, I'd like to take this as, both learning and working or doing, practice and reflection should go hand in hand. And I think if we impart these particular theological articulations to the congregation, we'll have a more holistic view of what a congregation or a faith community should be embracing as their own. So I think that's what I just want to say.
Thank you, Reverend Kim. Let's turn to Ariel, Reverend Ariel.
Yeah, I have 2 points. When I was ministering in the Philippines, I am ministering a church who's oriented towards growth, towards development, towards more people coming in. When I arrived here, they want me to pastor a church who is oriented towards closing down. They would want to close down. Their orientation is closing down the church, but I wasn't oriented towards that. I believe the church has a space for, or I believe the church is growing. We just need to look at the situation right now. The reality is that a lot of people are coming in Canada from different countries through different streams, and this reality is challenging the notion that we should close down churches. The coming in of migrants that poses hope for a more renewed church, and that's a theological challenge. How do we accommodate, and how do we become a church that is hospitable for people like for people outside, for people who comes from outside Canada? So will it entail changes inside the structure of the church? Will it entail a behavior change? So those are challenges we need to face. Another one is not having venues where experiences of Filipinos are articulated and understood. Most often than not, Filipinos are just working and working. There's no time to delve into their lives theologically. So I think it's important that we create intentional venues where lives in a setting like this, kwentuhan, relax, no pressure environment, just a space to be, to celebrate our identities, to be who we are, and that's where the creative spirit of the Lord comes in. I think it's important we create those kind of venues, and again, change of mindset. I don't think I will be undertaking a church I think I will be ministering a church towards growth and a brand of United Church of Canada has a specific brand and it's progressive, it's affirming. So I think and those things speaks to many migrants in many ways.
Thank you, Reverend Ariel. Let me just go to the chat again. Some of this, Sando, eh, your experience and feeling resonate with my own experience of serving, at churches, especially in the rural areas. Thank you for that. And then there's another one here at the end. I currently serve within the United Church congregation in Winnipeg, and we are attempting to be an intercultural congregation. We currently have a number of different cultures worshiping together, including a good number of Filipinos. I'm curious about the division of faith and social activism that Ariel mentioned, and wonder about guidance in approaching this theological topic within this intercultural context. Before we go to Ariel for that, there's another one here. Our church have doubled due into influx of LGBTQ asylum seekers from, and quoting Josephine Ruiz, a Filipino congregant from New Vision Church in Hamilton. Um, I just want to say thank you very much for mentioning growth. As the growth coordinator in the new strategic plan among to create new communities of faith among diasporic and migrant communities. You're always welcome to do church planting with me. um, Having said that, to the side, let's go back. Ariel, do you want, please, Reverend Ariel, please do some respond to Leslie's um, feedback.
Uh,
Specifically, I am
mhm,
curious about this division of faith and social
mhm,
activism that Ariel mentioned, and wonder about guidance in approaching this theological topic within this
mhm.
intercultural context,
Yeah,
especially referring to her congregation or community of faith.
thank you. It's a wonderful question. I'm also thinking about it. Um, I'm coming from from a place of describing a Filipino imagination. There's no such thing as one monolithic Filipino imagination. Of course, there's a variety, but generally, we think of faith and social activism as two different points. Um, I mentioned it's normally compartmentalized. You do your faith, but you don't do politics or social activism. You do social activism and not engage with your faith. There's that such separation. Those are one of the ways to view it is that they are separate, they're compartments, but other ways of viewing it, of understanding it, is that they are complementary. Your faith is informed by your social activism in the same manner that your social activism springs from your particular belief in God. Most Filipinos, if you would want to understand, inhabit a inhabit a position of conservatism in 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 their faith in terms of their political participation. So so there's such divide. Not you won't see many Filipinos who are really engaged in politics, although their lives are um, weaved through different political decisions. For example, the reason they are here is because of a government policy of sending a Filipino abroad in order for because there's no job home, and those are political issues. And there's no genuine agrarian reform in the Philippines, so they don't have land to till. They don't have jobs to do. Their money, the money they got from their company is not enough. Those are political issues, but sometimes faith doesn't speak to them to those realities because we are not trained in in our imagination to complement our faith with social activism. Um, yeah, it's very political that Filipino people are here. I think it's part of a global process that is beyond our control. Uh, like global processes of neoliberal policies, um, um, debt, debt of debt payment by third world countries and to international finance agencies. So those are political issues, but sometimes faith doesn't speak to them because we are not trained to do that. Again, there's no one monolithic Filipino imagination. Those just one of the ways to view politics, social activism, and faith.
Thank you, Reverend Ariel. How about you, Reverend Noel? You did some. Do you reply to it? Do you want to add to that? Anything verbal? Okay. Um, as there's nothing more that's being put in the chat, we will move on to the closing. And I would like to invite our Reverend Michael Blair, the General Secretary of the United Church of Canada, to give his reflection from what has been shared tonight.
Thank you, Emo, and good evening, folks. It's good to be here and to be part of this conversation. I'm just reminded as I'm sitting and listening, I'm in just outside of Winnipeg at the moment and have spent some time with former moderator, the Very Reverend Stan McKay. One of the things that Stan mentioned about an hour or so ago, or an hour and a half ago, was the fact that when newcomers come to the land, they come with gifts. And their gifts, part of their gifts is the stories they bring. And he was reflecting on the fact that often we become so busy trying to quote unquote Canadianize newcomers that we don't take time to pay attention to their stories. And I think this evening we've had a gift of hearing the stories of newcomers among us, and that those gifts come out of their lived experience, their life journeys, and the context in which they have found themselves, the context they've grown up in, the context of the Philippines. And I know there was hint at it in some of these conversations, but the recognition of the many factors that contribute to migration of Filipinos to Canada and other parts of the world. So I think it's important, as we've listened to the stories, one is to remind ourselves that stories matter, and that many stories matter, as the Nigerian author Chinamande Adichie reminds us, that stories are important. And it's important to take the time to listen to the stories of each other, and particularly the stories of newcomers. I think that's a critical piece that I would want to underscore. The second thing that I would sort of underscore out of the conversation tonight is the fact that often when newcomers come into our context, and particularly newcomers come into the context of the United Church, we forget that these folks are folks who have been formed in a faith tradition, and that they're not blank slates, as it were, and that they come with gifts, they come with desires, they come with a faith ready to engage and to serve. And somehow we fail at times to recognize what they bring. I think I feel hopeful out of this conversation because all three of the participants have spoken favorably about their experience of coming into the United Church. And I hope that is not only true for these folks, but it will be true of others who come in. And we've heard tonight of the kind of journey and the things that have shaped the lives of Noel and Ariel and Kim. And again, I think it's an invitation for us to think about appreciating the fact that when newcomers come into this context, come into our context, that they are people who have already been shaped and matured by a faith journey. And we need to be able to create the space as Noel and Ariel and Kim have experienced a welcoming space. And again, you know, we tend to want to have people prove to us rather than simply to celebrate and welcome people as fellow disciples of Jesus Christ. And I think that's, and at least for me, that's an important part. I think the third thing I want to reflect on out of this conversation is the realization, as we've heard the stories, all three have shared different ways of both coming to ministry and how what they learn in ministry or the history that they bring shape their theological understanding. The notion of resilience that Kim mentioned, that for her it's a theology of resilience, and we hear how that has kind of shaped her journey and her persistent, I think, in that journey, that resilience to fulfill the calling that she felt that God had placed on her life. Ariel talked about the kind of intersectionality between faith and social activism. And in many ways, that in some ways his engagement in the world of social activism has deepened and enriched his faith. And it's something that he brings in terms of his ministry. And Noel, as Noel talks about, you know, is particularly his, and just because I know him, his work in the kind of ecumenical interfaith spaces, the ways in which his study and his teaching has kind of shaped what he brings. And again, just an appreciation, I think, as Ariel and as Emma started out this conversation, that there are multiplicity of cultures and a multiplicity of imaginations, theological imaginations, and that this, to me, reminds us of the call of the United Church in terms of an intercultural reality, and that intercultural reality is where we celebrate the diversity. And I think the final thing I would say is that for me, this conversation causes me to pause. And I hope for those of us who are engaged in ministry in the broader United Church and places where engaged in ministry and engaging with the newcomers, is that there is no one size fit all. You've heard three different stories, three different experiences, three different theological faith imagination. And in some ways, the gift is to be able to appreciate and hold the diversity of the stories, the diversity of individuals, and not assume. Far too often, I hear people say, oh, they're Filipinos, they must be Catholic. And so there's a kind of a painting a picture where, you know, all Filipinos are Catholic. Well, you've heard tonight that that's not a true assessment. And you've heard tonight three folks from the Philippines who have migrated into the Canadian context, who bring different energies. And so what a gift and what an opportunity for us to lean in to be present to each other, to listen to each other's stories, and not to somehow eradicate the uniqueness of each individual by stereotyping them. So gratitude for this conversation. And those are a few of the things that I wanted to lift up out of this conversation. So thank you.
Many thanks to the General Secretary for the reflection, and I'm very grateful you picked up on the multiplicity of everything in the Philippines. In preparing for this, somebody asked, should we be talking about the same things here? And then eventually he said, no, we're not that. Just say whatever you want, or from basically how you interpret it from your religious or denominational background that you came from, your cultural background that you came from. And ultimately, everything is about interpreting and hermeneutics here and how we come to understand God and the talk, what we share now from there. In ending, thank you very much to everybody. I just want to point you to what we have put down in the, sorry, there is an evaluation form that we would hope that you would fill out, and just to be able to give us some feedback. And so if you can save that link and get back to it sometime today, that is much appreciated. So in ending, thank you to Reverend Kim Vidal, Reverend Ariel Shagan, Reverend Noel Suministrado, and the Reverend Michael Blair. And to everybody else, thank you for joining. And Kim will close us in prayer. Thank you. You have to turn on your unmute yourself.
Let us gather our hearts in prayer. Spirit of love, you call us to be in relationship, living and working with one another, supporting and healing one another. You call us into a community working for the common good of all, making choices that bring hope and justice and freedom to our world. Remind us to welcome the stranger, offering support to those who have recently immigrated and those who have immigrated, and giving comfort to the refugees. Empower us that we may change our way of thinking, to live comfortably without sharing what we have with other people, to improve their quality of life. Enable us to respect each person, to reach out to those in need, to value and appreciate those who differ from us, to receive the gifts offered to us by people from other cultures and faiths. This is our prayer in the name of the resilient and persistent one, Jesus the Christ. Amen.
And amen. And amen.
Thank you very much, folks. Blessings to everybody, and we'll hope to see you again. And hopefully, here's an invitation to our Korean folks in the Korean network, that we can hear something from them of this kind as well.
Mhm.
Thank you,
Blessings to
Michael.
all. Blessings.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you all.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Glenn.
Bye, folks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Imo, can we stay for a minute?
Yeah, we will.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks, Glenn. Good to see you.
Take it that you're from the same congregation.
No, he was part of my immersion program.
Okay.
So I guided them with Dr. Ellie Fernandez years ago. So,
Okay.
so yeah.
Okay, I have to stop recording now.